Hi there everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in this video we are going to see how testing works in React. So we are going to learn what is testing, why testing is important, and how to write test cases for your React application. So without any delay, let's begin. And here you can see the definition of testing, and if you read here, it is saying that test is defined as a group of conditions under which a tester determines whether a software application is working as per the requirement or not. So basically, testing helps you to determine whether your code is working properly or not. You can write some test cases and you can find that whether that particular function is working or not properly as it is supposed to work. And now you might be saying, hey, why do I need to write test cases for that? I can directly go and open the React application and then check whether it is working or not. Yeah, well, you can do that if you're working in a small application, then you can avoid writing test cases. But if you're working in a large application, then testing is the way to go. You cannot avoid testing. If you want your React application to be bug free and it is a large scale project, then you should write test cases. So now that you understood what is testing and why is it so important, now I'm going to show you this simple to-do app. So this is the app where we are going to write some of the test cases and going to check whether this application is working properly or not. And if you want to follow along with me, then make sure you clone this project. I'm going to link it in the descriptions below. Click that link, go to the GitHub page and clone this project, and then you're going to get this app and running in your system, and then you can start writing test cases along with me. So let me show you this is a simple to-do app. So basically you can enter some of the to-do here. So I'm going to write here, go to the gym, and there you go, it just lists down the to-do and you can delete it. That's also, it's a very basic simple to-do app. So here we are going to write some of the test cases and going to see whether our code is bug free or not. So, and in order to write test cases in React, we have something called React testing library. We are going to use that. And if you have created your React project using React app or CRA, then you don't need to configure your React testing library. It is automatically configured in your project and you can start with it. But here, this project I have created using Wait. So in terms of Wait, you need to do some of the manual configuration. So let me show you this. So again, I told you that I'm going to link this project in the descriptions below. So for the configuration purposes, you don't need to write the code manually. You can copy paste the code. So firstly, what you need to do is you need to come up here, and in this white.config.js file, you need to open this, and then here you need to add this piece of code which is saying test, and you need to make global as true, environment as gsdom, and you need to give the part of the file to this setup file which is going to be /setup.js. So here we have this file. This is also something that you need to create in your project, and here this is the piece of code that you need to write it. Again, this is just for the configuration purposes. So you can go below from the description and you can open my GitHub page and you can copy paste this code. So this is basically the configuration part of testing. Once the configuration is done properly, then we can start with the testing. So then finally you need to create last one more file which is testutil.js, where you need to write this code here. Again, you can get this code from the description below in the link, and then you can copy paste this code. Now once these three files are ready, then you have configured your testing files. That's all. Now you can start writing test cases, but before that you need to install some of the stuff like React testing library and all. So here you need to come here, and firstly you need to install something called ytest. So this is the command npm install ytest -sap-dev. So this is what you need to do. And once you install this ytest, what you need to do is you need to come to your package.json file, and here what you need to do is you need to write test and you need to write ytest. So whenever you write npm test in your command, then the test is going to run. So that's all. And after that ytest is installed, the next thing you need to do is you need to come here and you need to install this JS DOM as well as the dep dependencies. And once you have installed these as well, then the next thing you need to do is you need to install this. You need to say npm install, and you need to install this testing library, which is a React testing library. And another thing you need to install is you need to install something called jsdom at the red testing library slash jsdom. So you can come here and copy this code, and then you can enter, or you can just look at this code below and you can simply install it. So once the installation part is done, then we are good to go. This setup, well, I have already shown you. Now you can basically go from the link and then you can copy that code as well. And now once the installation is done, setup is done, now we can finally start writing the test cases. So let's just say I want to write some of the test cases for this to do form. So basically let me give you a walkthrough of this project first. So here this is the app.js folder, and here you can see I have h1 where I have written to do app, and I've got two components. One is the to do form component and the other is the to do list component. And here you can see I have two functions, which is add to do and delete to do. Add to do is responsible for adding to do, and delete is responsible for deleting the to do. Now if you go to the to do form component, then here you can see we have an input element, right? So this is the input element, and we have this add to do button. All right, and we simply have this one handle submit. When someone hit this add to do button, so this handle submit is going to call, and here it is going to add some to do, right? So it is going to call this add to do function, and it is going to add whatever the to do user has typed over here. So this is your simple to do form component. And after that we have something called to do list component. So in to do list component, basically what we are getting is we are passing all the to do's and delete to do as prop, and here what it is doing is it is mapping out all the to do and calling a new component called to do item, and it is passing its key to do and delete to do function. And if you open this component, here you can see it is simply laying out the to do, and it is having this delete button which is calling this delete to do. So that's also this was a quick walkthrough of this to do application. And now what we are going to do is we are going to write some of the test cases for this to do form component. So this is going to be a beginner friendly video where you are going to learn everything about testing from scratch. All right, so here you can come to this component folder and you can simply write to do form dot test dot jsx. So whenever you are creating a test file, this is how you are going to create it. Simply you are going to write the name of the component on which you want to test. So this is the to do form component that I want to test. So I have written the name, and you need to write dot test dot jsx. So if it is a jsx file, then you need to write dot .jsx. If it is a JS, then well, you need to write JS. So that's all. And now in order to write test, first you need to call something of a function called describe. And in this describe function, you need to pass a parameter as string, which is basically going to say what test are you going to do, or on what component, or on what group of class you are going to apply this test. Well, I'm going to apply this test on this to do form component. So here I'm simply going to write to do form, because this test is being done on to do form component. And here you are going to pass a callback function. And now inside this described callback function, you are going to write a small unit test cases for each element inside this to do form component, and that you are going to do using this it function. So similarly, this it also accepts an argument which is going to take string as in first, which is going to basically where we are going to define what is the name of the test that we are doing here. So let's just say I'm going to firstly test whether this to do form component is being rendered on the web or not. So here this to do form component is being rendered, so I want to test whether this to do form component is being rendered or not. So for that I need to pass here renders, it renders to do form. Okay, so it is going to say it renders to do form component. So basically this is what it is going to test, so that's why I'm going to write it renders to do form component. All right, and after that I need to pass a callback function here where I need to write the actual test cases to check whether it is rendering the to do form component or not. And how do we do that? It is very simple. You just need to call one function which is render, and notice VS Code is auto imported for me, so make sure you import it from testing library / react, and you just call this function. All right, and let me remove this, it's a typo here. Okay, and okay, let me remove this completely from here, and let me remove this as well. And here you just need to write render, and you just need to pass the name of the component that you want to test whether it is rendering or not. Well, I want to check whether this to do form component is rendering or not, so here I just need to pass the name of the component. Simply I'm going to set to do form, and you need to import this to do form component as well. So here I have imported, and you just enter that component here, and it is going to tell you whether this component is being rendered or not. And how do we check it? Well, you just open your terminal. Here I have opened my project which is to do app testing, and here you simply write npm test command, and it is going to run, because you know that in the package.json we have already configured test as vitals. So now if you run npm test, then it is simply going to work. So let me hit enter, and it is going to start our test. So here, there you go. So it is going to take some time, and it is going to start the test, and we have successfully written our first test cases which passed it as well. So as you can see, we have test file 1. So because we have created only one test file, so that's why it is saying test file 1 passed, and inside this test file we have written one test which got passed, right? So there isn't any error. So let's just say our test case didn't got passed, and if there is some kind of error, then it is going to show some error here. But here the to do form component is rendering successfully, so that's why the test got passed. So let's just say if the to do form component was not rendering here successfully, then the test would have failed, and we would have find some bug, and we could have fixed that, and then eventually the test is going to pass. So we have written one simple test cases. Now let us move forward and write another test case as well. So another test case is going to be where we are going to check whether the input field is empty or not in its initial state. So whenever user loads this page, so initially the input field needs to be empty, right? So this input field should not be filled with something else. So this input field needs to be empty. Now, so we're going to check whether this input field is empty or not. So for that, what we need to do is we need to grab this input field tag here inside this test file. So for that, it's pretty easy. What you need to do is we have some of the variables that allows us to do so, which is being given to us by this render. So we have this render and to do form that we have passed. So from there we are going to get access of all these elements. So in order to grab that, we have something called get by test id. So let me show you. So here we have many more other options as well. Like in order to grab these elements, we have get by alt text, display value, label, role, right? So currently we are going to get this get by test id. So by using this, we are going to grab this input field, and as you can see, this inside this input field we have this id which is saying data test id input box. So using this id, basically we are going to grab this input field. So here we have got this get by test id using this render function, and now what we are going to do is we are going to simply grab the input field. So I'm going to say const input field get by test id, that's all, and I'm going to pass the name of the id which is the input box. Okay, and I've got this input field. Now what I want is I'm going to pass a function called expect. So basically it is going to expect this input field, and let me pass this input field here. So what basically it is saying is expect this input field. What I want to do is input field dot value. So I'm writing this input field dot value because I want to know what is inside this input field, right? What is the value? I want to make sure that this input field value is empty. So that's why I'm doing input field dot value, and I'm saying expect the value of the input field should be. So for that we have a method called to be. All right, and then inside this function call I am passing an empty string. So this is a pretty self-explanatory code. So it is saying that expect this the value of this input field to be empty, right? So that's why I'm passing this empty string. So it is saying that the value of this input field should be empty. Now the test case should pass, and as you can see here, the test case is passed. It is saying we have written two tests and both of the tests got passed. So this is the first test and this is the second test. So let's just say if there is something. So whenever the page gets loaded, so there is already something being typed in this input field. So let's create that scenario here. So let us come to this app component, and here let me come to this to do form component, and as you can see the value is the input value which is coming from the state which is empty as of now. And simply let me add the initial text here. Let me say it is going to be go to the gym. Okay, so let me write go to the gym, and now initially it is not empty, right? So it should be empty. Now the test case should fail. So let me come here and let me show you, and there you go. So the test case is being failed. We can see red here. So total test files we have one and it got failed, and in total test we have two tests. As you can see here, if you come here, we have one which is testing whether the to do form component is rendering or not, and another test which is testing whether the initial input field is empty or not. So it sure I'm going to change the message and I'm going to say it checks the input. Let me correct it. So it checks the input field. Okay, checks the input field is empty or not. So that's all. So this is the message that I have written out here. So basically this is what the test is doing. Now if I come here and let me show you an error here, basically it is showing that we got an error, expected go to the gym to be empty, right? So here it is basically saying expected go to the gym object dot is equality. So basically it is showing you where we got this error, and here it is expecting an empty but it received some string out here. So that's why one test got failed. So that's why it is saying one failed. This is the test, it got failed, and here it is saying one passed. So this is the above test that got passed. All right, now we can fix that by removing this. So this is the bug that we have created, and let us fix this bug by simply removing it, right? And now initially the input field is empty. Now the test case should pass. We have removed the bug, and let me show you here. Okay, now both the test case got passed and it is saying to pass. So notice the writing test cases in React is pretty easy. You just need a habit of writing it, and you can just google it around, go to the documentation, and basically you can write it. Some of the good test cases, like you can come here and write React testing library. You just type it out here, React testing library, hit enter, and you just open this documentation, right? So here you're going to get all the follow-up guide. Basically you can come here and you can check, all right, and you can get some of the jest functions as well for testing, right? So let me write just JS out here, and basically here you have all the testing functions that you want for testing purposes, that you can get it out here as well. Okay, so let us get back to the video quickly, and let us write another test cases here. So another test case is going to be is basically if I come to the app and if I write something here like go to the gym, and if I hit this add to do button, then it is adding this to do, right? And if I delete it, it is deleting. But what if the input field is empty, and if I click this add to do button, it should not add it, right? So basically I want to test this functionality, whether if the input field is empty, whether this add to do is function is being called or not. And now if add to do, if this input field is empty, then this add to do function should not be called. So that's the test cases that we are going to write here. So basically here I'm going to change the message, I'm going to say it should not call add to do function, all right, when input field is empty. So let me type that quickly, and then here we are going to write those test cases. Now here basically we need to grab this button as well, and then we need to check whether on the click of this button, and if this input field is empty, whether this add to do function is being called or not. So that's what we want to test it. So we need to grab that button as well. So in order to grab that button, I'm going to use another method, which is basically get by role. Okay, so I can grab that button using get by test ID as well, but I'm just going to show you other options or other way of doing it here. So and here basically I'm simply going to grab that add button by saying const add button. So let me write it here properly, and here what I'm going to say is I'm going to write get by role, and here I want to grab the button here. So notice you can see different options as well here, checkbox, code and whatnot. So I want to grab the button, so I'm simply going to write the button, and I'm going to pass the object, and I'm going to write which button I want to grab. So I need to mention the name of the button as well. So if I come to this to do form component, and you can see the name of the button is add to do here. So I'm simply going to pass add to do here. So by doing so, basically I have grabbed this add to do button, and now what I need to do is I need to mimic an event that user has clicked on this add to do button. So for that, React testing library provide us something which helps us to mimic this scenario, which is known as fire event. So let me just hit enter, and as you can see that VS Code has auto imported me it from testing library / React. So make sure you import it as well. So you just need to do fire event dot what type of event you want. So here I want the click event, so I'm simply writing dot click, and I want to fire that click event onto this add button, right? So here that's why I passed this add button. Now it is mimicking this add to do, right? So it is simply mimicking that some user has clicked on this add to do button, right? So the event is being fired, and now basically I want to check when the user has clicked on this add to do button and the input field is empty. So in that case, whether this add to do function is being called or not. And as you can see here, this to do form is also expecting this add to do function here. So we need to actually create a mock-up function. We need to create it here. So how we are going to test basically whether this add to do function is called or not. So for that, basically we are going to create a mock function or a dummy function, right? So in order to do that, it's pretty simple. Here I'm simply going to say mock add, and I'm going to say vi. So you need to import this vi as well. So here from the whitest you need to import it, and then I'm simply going to say vi.fn. So by doing so, basically now this mock add is going to act like a function, and here we are simply going to add this mock add as an add to do function here. Okay, I'm simply going to pass it as mock add. Okay, let me write it as mock add here. Now that we have passed this function add to do function by mocking it using the vi dot function, now we are going to simply check whether this function is being called or not once this act button is being clicked. So how do we check whether it has been called or not? That is again simple. We need this function called expect, and here inside that we need to pass that mock function which is mock add, and here simply what I need to do is I need to write dot not dot to have been called. So all right, to have been called. So this code is pretty self-explanatory again. So what I'm expecting is I'm expecting this mod add function to have been called, but before that I have written not. So basically it is saying that this mock add function should not called. Okay, it should not have been called when this add button function is being clicked and then this input field is empty. So in that case it should not call it. And now here the test case should pass. So here the test case is passed, all the three test cases passed. Now if I remove this not, and now basically now the condition is changed. Now what I'm expecting is whenever user click on this add button, and even if the input field is empty, this add to do function should have been called. So that's why it is saying to have been called, and now the test case should fail. So here you can see the test case got failed. Earlier two tests got passed, but the one test got failed here. So basically it is saying expected spy to be called at least once. So we are expecting that it should call it, but it is not calling it. So basically we want that it should not call here. So let us fix this and write not, and now this test case is going to pass here, and all the test cases got pass. Now similarly we are going to write another test cases where we are going to say that if this input field is not empty and if user hits this add to do function, add to do button, then add to do function should be called and this add to do should be listed out here, right? So testing that is pretty simple. We just need to duplicate this code here. So let me duplicate it, and here let me change the message. Instead of should not, basically it should call add to do function when input field is not empty, right? So for that all the code are already being written. I'm simply going to remove that not, and I'm going to simply say to have been called, and I'm going to write times. So I want that add to do function to be called only one time, right? So basically when user adds some to do here, I want this to do to be added only one time. I don't want this to do to be added multiple times. So that's why I'm writing times one, because this add to do function should be called only one time. Now before that again we need to add some values inside this to do input field also using our inside this test form file. So how can we do that? That is again pretty simple. Basically what we are going to do is we are going to use this fire event here, and we are going to create a new event which is a change event. All right, so that's what we are going to do here. We want to create this change event inside this input field, so that's why I'm writing input field. And now the change event is created out here, and now using this change event I want to add some value inside this input field. So for that what I need to do is I need to write target here, okay, not event target. So I need to write it target here, and then I need to write value. So value, let me write it as new to do, right? So this is the, let me write it new to do. So now this is the value new to do which is going to be added inside this to input field here, right? So now this value got added, and now after that once that value new to do value is being added inside this input field, after that we are again creating another event inside this add button, and this add button gets clicked, and then after that we are expecting that this mock add, which is basically a mock function of this add to do, it should have been called or to have been called times one. Basically we are expecting that this add to do function should called at least one time. So that's what we are expecting, and now this test case should pass, and let me open, and basically here it is passed, 4 test case got passed. But if I change it to, then the test case is going to be false, or it is going to fail, because we know that once the user has typed something out here in the input field and user hit this add to do button, then the to do should be added only one time. It means that this add to do function should be called only one time. It should not be called two times. Here I am expecting that this add to do function to be called two times, so that's why the test case got failed here. And here it is saying expected to received one. Basically it means I am expecting that this add to do function to be called two times, but it got called only one times. Well, actually in reality we want this add to the function to be called only one time. So let me change it to 1, and now the test case is passed successfully. So that's it for today's guys. This was a beginner friendly video on how testing works in React and how to write testing for the React component. If you like this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll come up with more such videos again.